Welcome to MBA 543, St. Francis University. This is Chapter 7, and I am your instructor, Adam Conrad. So today we're going to talk about some product selling strategies that add value. And what we're going to be talking about is, in terms of learning objectives for this chapter, is describe how we're going to position the product selling strategy, explain the 3D product solution selling model, discuss product positioning options. We're going to explain how to sell your product with a price strategy and how to sell your product with a value-added strategy. So we're going to talk a little bit about product positioning. So product positioning is essentially the decisions and the activities that we want to essentially create a concept of the product in somebody's mind. So the customer, you think about the product positioning. You position a product like Lexus, for example, is used in an earlier chapter. You position it versus Chevrolet, for example. So positioning is, you want to create a concept in the customer's mind when they hear the name or they hear the product or they see the product, that it creates essentially an image in their mind of what it is. And so you're going to basically use a combination of marketing and sales strategy to position your products based on the unique needs of your clients, because your clients are all going to have their own point of view. So you're going to aim at influence a particular market segment and how they perceive the product in comparison to the competition. So let's face it, a company like Tesla has a certain market position. A company like Lexus, I'll use cars, I'm a big car fan, so we'll use cars as an example. You take different products and you position them against one another, and automatically, based on the work that's been done over time and the experience with products, people have a notion of what they think about that product. It has to be continually configured and custom fitted by the salesperson to match each customer's specific wants and needs. Now, keep in mind that while cars have online configurators that you can configure the interior and certain trim levels and things like that, those are pretty much standard type configuration levels. That's very, very different than what you run into in direct selling, because in direct selling, you often are running into clients that have extremely detailed specifications for their products. So you take a hospital, for example, and as in a software business for hospitals, they have very specific configurations that they want. And as a salesperson, you're continually updating and customizing, working with your team at your company to make sure that you can meet the needs of your particular client. And those needs change over time. Your differentiation is how you stand out from the crowd. So this is going to be how your company is different and stands out. It becomes the key to your competitive advantage. So how your company is perceived and the work that you do, when you say a name, it creates a specific connotation. And these things can vary based on the different types of things that make up that. So take something simple like a grocery store. So the company Aldi, for example, as a grocery store, has a different approach to it than maybe a traditional supermarket that you're familiar with. They've come up with a differentiation. A sister company to Aldi is Trader Joe's. And so you look at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, and you realize that those companies have created a differentiation in the market based on their positioning as grocery stores. And so it's going to be a matter of quality, price. Sometimes these companies are not necessarily shooting for the best price, convenience, economy, service. And then other factors. I mean, they're just, you go into an Aldi, for example, and you shop and they don't provide bags. So at all. So you either pick up some boxes or you bring your own bags. You're going to have to figure out a way to get it out of the cart into your car and get home with those items and unpack them with your groceries. Another example of the Aldi is that they don't believe in parking attendants to pick up all the shopping carts. So they've created a system where the shopping carts require a quarter to unlock them from the row of shopping carts. And interestingly, for a quarter, it's interesting how many people will make sure that they return that shopping cart so that they can get their quarter back. And it's only 25 cents, but that has become a mechanism that's unique to them that actually works to help them save cost. So a value proposition is a set of benefits and values the salesperson configures to meet and exceed the customer's specific needs. So when I was in the business of selling software to hospitals, one of the things we did in terms of a value proposition was we would take a look at all of the information that the hospital accounting and billing department was working through, and we would analyze that, or portions of it, and determine how much we were going to be able to save based on some of their workload. That value proposition easily translated into dollar benefits. So we could literally make the argument that if you used our software and implemented our software, you'd save somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 times or 4 times the cost of the software. So that value proposition, it becomes almost like a no-brainer for folks to look at that and say, well, geez, if we implement this, we're going to get our money back many times over. And that gets into essentially quantifying the value proposition. So when you got a business-to-business buyer, like I exampled, quantifying that process and showing them real dollar benefits equals a really strong reason why they're going to go ahead and make the purchase. So if they go ahead and buy your product or service, you're going to absolutely be able to retain a certain amount of benefits. Some companies, depending on their ability to deliver results, may even go what we call at risk, and they'll guarantee results. They'll say, look, either you get 4 times your money out of this, or we'll cut the price, for example. And so the book example is Kenworth trucks. And so if you've got a freight company looking to buy 700 new trucks, you know that the trucks cost, if you're Kenworth, you know your trucks cost 10% more than your competitor trucks. So in your proposal, you're going to need to quantify the benefit of buying Kenworth trucks, and that's going to be higher trade-in value, lower maintenance costs, the interiors or the amenities that are in the trucks that help recruit drivers, maybe perhaps a better mileage if they get a better fuel economy. Certainly, you look at something like Tesla, who's testing over-the-road trucks and battery-operated trucks, over diesel. You got companies that are literally competing for the attention or the ability to buy these trucks because of the visibility as a green company, so to speak, that's using this new technology, and the cost savings that they expect to receive. So it might not just be strictly cost, it might be perception. You're perceived to be a company who's more friendly with the environment, or actually not just perceived, but actually more friendly with the environment, is something that might be worthwhile in terms of your overall value proposition of why a client might make a choice. So what are some of the dimensions of service quality? So we talk about the 3D, the product solution selling model, and some of the dimensions of service quality. Customers are going to value or judge the quality of each service transaction based on 5 quality dimensions. They're going to look at the tangibles, the reliability, so tangibles, so these are things that customers can see, the appearance of personnel, the appearance of the equipment, the reliability, the ability to perform the desired service dependably, accurately, and consistently. Responsiveness, the willingness of sales and customer service personnel to provide prompt service and helpful service to their customers. Assurance, the employee's knowledge, courtesy, and ability to convey trust and confidence. And empathy, the provision of caring and individualized attention to customers. So, it's interesting that if you're trying to, particularly in conversion business, where you're trying to convert a client in business to business, you're trying to convert them over from a software program, for example, to a different software program. You may, as a salesperson, very much have it nailed in terms of the service and reliability of your product, and maybe matches the customer's stated needs better. But if your company doesn't have a reputation for assurance and empathy, and your competitor does, they may have inferior products that cost more, but because they have an existing relationship with a client and they have better empathy and they have better the ability to show the individualized attention to the client, you may have a very difficult time unseating particularly an incumbent. So that's something you have to really think about a bit whenever you're dealing with an incumbent. One of the students in class is actually recruits for college sports teams. And so, reading some of the biographies of some of the folks in class, I'll try to tie some of that in. So when you look at the fact that you've got to recruit, it's really important to know that if you're trying to go out and recruit a student and their whole family has always gone to a college in Ohio, and you're trying to recruit them into Pennsylvania, you've got, even though you may have all of these other things nailed, you may find yourself in a position where you can't recruit that particular student because of assurance and empathy, that they have for another team or for a team that other family members have gone to. So again, some of the using the 3D product solution selling model, some of the things we're going to get into. We're going to get into some things like product, company, and salespeople, but we really want to look at today's product, today's salesperson, today's company. And so when you look at this model here for the three-dimensional product selling solutions model, a successful product strategy is going to include a cluster of satisfactions that meet the needs of today's better educated and more demanding customers. And don't underestimate the fact that today's customers are exactly that. They're better educated, they're more demanding, they're just really super knowledgeable. The fact that they can do research from their desktop on just about any topic or any product is extremely powerful. Satisfactions are going to arise from the product itself. So you look at the satisfactions, you look at from the product itself, the company that makes or distributes the product, and from the salesperson who sells and services the product. And it's no question whatsoever that a good salesperson has a great relationship with the client is worthwhile hire for many companies because, and that's why we'll talk about at some point non-compete agreements, because salespeople develop a relationship with clients, and oftentimes a client want to deal with that salesperson. So the 3D product solution selling model also illustrates the product, company, and salespeople features that are available to satisfy those. So if you look at the clusters there, the salesperson can configure value-added solutions that meet and potentially exceed individual customer needs. And as we saw in Chapter 6, many companies are moving from product selling to solution selling because just selling products doesn't necessarily equate to why is this good for me as a client. You have to look at the solution and see, does that meet the needs of the client specifically, or is it just simply you're just throwing features at me? It's that whole feature advantage and benefit. So again, in order to stand out in very crowded competitive markets, it's very important to deeply consider what the client values and what their needs are in order to be able to satisfy those and be able to stand out from your competition. So in using the 3D product solution selling model, some of the things, the areas that engage the customer and identify the problem are going to be questions. Notice it's questions. You want to dig deep and dive in and figure out, what are the product questions we need answered? What are the company questions? What are the salespeople questions we need to know? And so an example from the text is Elaine Parker, a sales representative for Elmore Industries, sells metals for manufacturing. Over a period of 6 months, she's frequently called on a prospect who had the potential to become a valued customer. During every call, the buyer's receptionist told her they were happy with their current supplier. She refused to give up, and the sales rep refused to give up, and finally the buyer agreed to see her. At first, she was greeted with cool silence, not unlike what we deal with in sales. So she decided to ask him some questions about his business. How's the slow economy, for example, affecting your sales? The buyer's answers focused on material costs. He said his company could not raise prices or cut quality. He wanted a lower cost, but was unsure how it could be done. Parker, the sales rep, offered product developments the buyer was not familiar with and suggested that the buyer consider trying some new alloys that were less expensive than the standard metals he had been purchasing. As she described the new alloys, which exceeded the buyer's expectations, interest began to build. She offered to bring in 2 of her company's best product engineers to help make a full presentation to the buyer and his engineers at a follow-up meeting. The second meeting was a success. Soon after that meeting, Parker received her first order from the customer. Within a year, she had become the customer's most trusted advisor on technological developments in the industry and became his exclusive supplier. So Elaine Parker used questions to engage the customer and identify the problem, which is really essentially what we've been talking about in these last couple of chapters. We're really talking about how we're moving from just throwing a bunch of features at people and saying, try this, and going back and saying, let's ask some questions about your business. what are the drivers in your business? What are the challenges you're finding in this business? Why do you think you're successful in this business? Why are your competitors successful? And so by asking a bunch of questions about the company and the products, which products are doing well, which ones are not doing as well, what do you think it would take to get your products to be adopted more widely, for example? So by asking a bunch of questions, you can essentially drill down into what are the real, as we like to call them, pain points. What are the things that are bugging the client or are challenges that are standing in their way? So a competitive analysis worksheet is a way for you to essentially, as a sales rep, to essentially achieve differentiation. So when you look at product attributes, for example, and you say, what's my competitor doing? What's my company doing? What are my competitors doing? Now you can get some of this information from prospective clients, from existing clients, but it's key that you could, at any given company, you should be able to sit down and write out this spreadsheet. You should be able to say, this is my company and this is the attributes of our quality, and this is competitor A, number one competitor, and competitor B, number two competitor. And these companies may be superior. Maybe you find these in most of your deals. I worked in a software company at one point in my career where it was almost always three competitors at the table. Sometimes it was the same three. Sometimes it was a couple of the second or first or second competitors would be swapped out for a different one. So I'd say generally speaking, there might be at any given deal 5 total competitors, and it would get narrowed down to 2 or 3. And I could almost count on the fact that I'd be competing against my number one competitor. I had to know that competitor inside and out because it would come down to one or the other of us in the deal. And, I don't know about you, but losing's not my favorite thing. And the other part of it is if I lost a deal to my competitor, I wouldn't get paid anything. Coming in second usually nets you no payday. This isn't like a golf match where there's a second prize. This is win or lose 100%. And so I learned very quickly that it was very important to win, obviously, and it was important to understand what my competitors were doing in order to help differentiate us in the marketplace. And so whatever this product attribute is, it could be, if it's software, it's going to be different than it is if it's a product. But you get the idea. It's very important to be able to analyze your product and know how you differentiate or stand apart from your competitors with product. The same thing is with company. One of the things that was of extreme importance when you're dealing, particularly in a software business, is that you had a company that was viable. If you bought software from a company that went out of business a year later, you would be in very dire straits as a customer, because you need, part of the facet of having software is that you need to be able to make sure that that's a software. Unlike in consumer software, if you buy a word processor today, it really doesn't matter. It matters, but it's not crucial to your success if 3 or 4 years ago the company that made it goes out of business, because it still works for you today. It is crucial if you're writing software for, like we were doing in clinical documentation or in billing systems. Billing requirements change, and if your vendor doesn't keep up, if the software company doesn't keep up with billing changes, you could be in a position where you wouldn't be able to do billing. So you can see how crucial it is that the company is viable and in business years later. So company attributes are real important. Same thing with salespeople. So again, when you put this grid together and you put down, here's my company and here's company A and company B, it's crucial that you know the differences. Again, you can collect this data from clients. I think any sales rep at any company should be able to sit down and fill this out for their company and for their 2 main competitors. Failure to be able to do that means you got some work to do. And that's actually a tool I've used in the past, just going into a company, managing their sales team. Very first thing I would do is I would sit down and I would actually get them to quantify what we knew about our company, what we thought we knew, and what we thought we knew about our competitors. The interesting thing that I learned quite a bit in that business, in the business of software, is that the companies rarely knew what their own strengths were. They thought that things that they were strong in were not necessarily things they were strong in, and they almost never knew what their competitors' strengths and weaknesses were. I was shocked to find that almost universally. They thought they knew, but my experience was they didn't know. Which comes back to product positioning. you can use various product positioning strategies to differentiate your value proposition. You can position new and emerging products versus well-established products. Price strategies, you can say, look, this product's at the end of its life cycle, we're pricing it better. You can position products with value-added strategies. But again, how easy is that to do when you don't know your strengths and weaknesses in your product? And so the key here is product knowledge and your competitor product knowledge. Some positioning considerations with the product lifecycle, which I touched on just briefly in the last slide. When you develop the product selling strategy, you got to consider where your product is positioned in terms of its life cycle. So the nature and extent of each stage of the product life cycle is determined by several factors, including its perceived advantage over other substitutes, the product's benefits and the importance of the needs it fulfills, competitive activity, including pricing, substitutes, product development and improvement, and effectiveness of competing advertising and promotion, changes in technology, fashion, or demographics. So it's really useful to know where your product is in the terms of its life cycle. Back when software products, and this may be before some of your times, products went from being DOS-based to Windows-based, or being server-based, Unix-based, like server type systems or AS400 to Windows-based. And interestingly, there's a lot of products that were really at the end of their life cycle running on essentially green screen or non-graphical user interfaces. And so some companies just adopted price strategies of, let's just get as many of these out there as we can now, because this thing's going to end soon and we're not going to be able to sell anymore. So that's a good example of software. Same might be true we use electric cars for an example. So straight electric cars that only have the Nissan Leaf, for example, which had, for a while there, only had maybe an 80 to 100 mile range, hasn't sold real well, because as a pure electric vehicle, people want to be able to have a car that will go further. They have what we call range anxiety. So other companies and cars have come out that have ranges of 200, 250, 300 plus miles. And so now companies like Nissan are figuring out, hey, we got to dump these cars that only have a 100-mile range. Let's go to ones that have 150 or 200 miles and continue to adjust the product strategy, because the consumers are telling us they want a longer range. So that's going to be, the mature product that I'll use the example of a car with a 100-mile range versus a product that's new and emerging that actually has much longer range. So in terms of your product sales strategy that you're going to use to sell in a new and emerging product is going to be different than selling a mature product. One of the things you get into quite a bit with selling new products is really trying to identify clients that are early adopters. So selling new products requires successfully providing new insights to add value, while selling mature products requires positioning product and company superiority over competition. Selling strategies used during the new and emerging stage are designed to develop a new level of expectation, change habits, and in some cases establish a new standard of quality, like I used in the example of cars. The goal is to build desire for the product. Salespeople must be resourceful, possess information regarding every aspect of the product, and be able to present a convincing value proposition. A relationship strategy is often critical in selling mature and well-established products, given the presence of intense competition out there with new products. New and emerging products selling strategy points were shown on the left here, or are shown on the screen. Mature and established product selling strategies are on the right-hand side of the screen. So, again, your relationship with your client, selling a mature product, they're going to continue to buy based on company reputation of the product. Where you have some people who are early adopters are going to be looking for newer technologies, newer products. They're going to be really, really interested in testing and new things versus looking for the reliability of something that's a known quantity. So then we talk about another learning objective in this chapter, which is pricing strategy. So we talked about in the beginning, you can't talk sales without talking the 4 Ps, price, promotion, product, and place that make up the marketing mix. So pricing decisions must be made at each stage of the product life cycle. So again, it might be at the mature part of a life cycle of a product. You're cashing out, making as much money on that product because the development cycle is over. But you get to a point where you start to lose sales because the product is so mature. You get to a point where you actually start discounting the product actually to harvest as much as you can out of it before it becomes obsolete. So you need to identify the firm's pricing objectives in terms of your ability to maximize profit and maximize market share. Because let's face it, the market is going to determine pricing in many cases, but you as a company can influence that quite a bit based on the fact you've got a mature product and you'd like to sell a bunch of it before it becomes obsolete. So let's talk a little bit about transactional selling and transactional selling tactics that emphasize low price. So some companies, and we actually train our clients to behave this way because they learn, it's interesting because particularly when you're selling very complex products, particularly software, hospital CFOs, I learned, became very keen on understanding that companies, particularly companies that are public companies that report earnings, are very keen on quarterly earnings. So they'll wait until the very end of a quarter before they'll sign a purchase order because they understand that the company will actually discount going into the end of the quarter because they know that the software companies will discount because the CFOs realize that they're about to report earnings. They want to jam as much into that quarter as possible. So you hear that when you hear about people say, well, they've got car dealers have a quota or salespeople have a quota. But oftentimes companies that report to financial markets will drive earnings, quarterly, half-year, annual earnings. So it becomes very important to keep track of that to see, and you can actually, as a purchaser, talk to the salespeople and say, well, how's your company doing for the quarter? And if you get a sense that they're behind on their number, it's a real neat strategy to be able to negotiate. So some companies have also taught their clients that they'll do quantity discounts, seasonal discounts, promotional alliances, trade or functional discounts, unbundling of product features. So what you really have to figure out is, as a salesperson is, where does our company fit into this strategy, pricing strategy, and how do we communicate this to our clients? The other thing is, where's competition fit into this? So if a company will meet competitive pricing, you might find this in your own life. You walk in, Best Buy will meet Amazon pricing, for example, because they don't want to lose the sale. So what you also see is, and this is a really keen strategy, is that what a lot of companies are doing now is they'll actually not have the same make and model of a product. Take, for example, I saw this at Christmas time, headsets. So Best Buy will stock a particular brand of a headset with a model number that only Best Buy has. And so it essentially is the identical model that Amazon sells, but with a different model number. And so it's identical, except that model number is different. And so when you go in to compare, you say, look, I'd like to purchase this one. Amazon's got it $20 cheaper. And Best Buy says, we don't have that model number. It's not the same thing. So you'll see a little bit of that, that I've actually encountered that personally, where, recognizing that companies will meet the competition from a pricing strategy, they've also come up with ways to help preserve their margins. And that's one example. So if you're planning on determining your pricing strategy, before you come up with a low price approach for your marketing, you want to ask, is pricing a critical factor in the sale of the product or service? And setting a price can be a firm's most complex and important decision. So before using a low price tactic, you want to ask, are you selling to high or low involvement buyers? How important is quality in the mind of buyers? And how important is service? Because if you're pricing something that's very complex, like software that has a huge service component, low price isn't going to be your answer. But if you're selling a commodity item, and consumers can essentially transactionally choose by clicking on one or the other, you're probably going to have a strategy that price is a factor. Professional fees is another area where you can actually add value and actually add to your margin. One of the challenges for professional service providers is how to develop a value proposition and decide how much to charge. Some points to consider when determining fees for a professional service involves experience, exclusivity, the target market, and the value that you bring to the market. So let's face it, if you as a service provider, provide a value that actually has real bottom line results, then you can charge for that. An example the book uses is professional athletic trainers or financial advisors. Some of these folks, stylists, personal shoppers, they have to know how to determine what their value proposition is. If you're a personal shopper for the stars and a star makes $10 million a year and you're able to save them time going out and doing their shopping for them, that has a much different value proposition than it does for somebody who doesn't have that kind of a high earnings potential. So it really comes down to the value that you're providing and the time that you save for them. So again, a bullseye here for value-added product selling model is to figure out how to sell your product with a value-added strategy. So most of your high-performing salespeople have adopted strategies that emphasize value-added selling. Salespeople can add value to their product with one or more of these intangibles. Improved insights and knowledge into your customer needs. So knowing what the customer may not even know themselves is going to be very valuable to that salesperson. Their product benefits that they have. The competitive offerings, how does it stand up against competitors? Stronger relationship and partnering with your clients. Better use of sales technologies is a strong suit. More dependable product deliveries. Better service after the sale. Innovations that truly improve the product value in the eyes of the customer. So to get an idea of the importance of value-added selling is really how it applies to different selling situations and how to visualize every product as being four-dimensional. So let's take a look at that product as being four-dimensional. So when you look at the product, the generic product, understanding a generic product is really the starting point. It's a basic product that you're selling. The expected product is what the customer's minimal expectations is for that product. The value-added product exists when many salespeople offer customers more than they expected and may not even know it exists. So again, this is the salesperson knowing more about what the customer's needs are, possibly than even the customer knows themselves, and being able to identify those points. The potential product refers to what may remain to be done, what's possible. It's more likely to be developed by salespeople who are close to their customers. I'm going to use a real life example in this because my brother happens to, I call my brother the car whisperer. So my brother actually runs a very successful business in diesel and transmission systems for automobiles. And when he first started in his transmission business, I said to him, what are you selling here? And the way he viewed it was really the generic product or the expected product. He said, well, we rebuild transmissions. And I said, well, that's really not what you're doing here. And he said, well, of course it's what we're doing here. Look around. I've got a building here and I've got benches and I've got equipment and tools to rebuild transmission. We got lifts to put the cars up and work on them. I said, yeah, but that's really the minimal expectation of customers is that you do a transmission, that you repair it. I said, that's not really what the business is. And he just looked at me quizzically and didn't quite get where I was going with this. I said, well, the business that you're really in, that you really haven't thought about, is that you're in the transportation continuity business. And at that point, he's like, look, I rebuild transmissions. I said, no, what you really are doing is trying to figure out how to keep people on the road. Most people don't have spare automobiles that they can drive. If there's something wrong with the transmission in their car and it doesn't work, they're simply not going to be able to get to work. I said, so you have to really consider what this business is. It's really a matter of keeping people on the road and getting them back and getting them to work or to school or wherever they're going. And once he understood that, then we built a value-added product and a potential product around that. The value-added product was that he literally had an arrangement with a tow service that they would take a rental car to the client and drop off a car and pick up the car that wasn't running. That enabled him essentially to keep the client on, keep the customer on the road, while at the same time, it enabled him to relieve a little pressure in his own shop, not having to do the job as quickly, but also it guaranteed the business. So was price as big of a deal for him? No, because he had a value-added product, which was much more powerful than his competitors, which made him the number one transmission operation in the area. So really thinking these things through, a lot of people look at sales and say, well, sales, I mean, you're really selling a transmission. No, but you really are configuring a company to be able to provide a value-added product. And I think that's the part of sales that a lot of people don't really think about, but is key to most companies, is being able to secure the business. So in review, we've talked about positioning as a product selling strategy, explained a 3D product solution selling model, discussed the product positioning options, how to sell your product with a price strategy, and how you sell your product with a value-added strategy. And that concludes Chapter 7.